The dark-suited messenger of doom ushered in the back door of Downing Street. Sir Graham Brady here to tell another Tory Prime Minister Conservative MPs don't want them anymore. Liz Truss, it seems, had already worked that out. And like a scaffold, the podium was being set up outside, drawing to a close the most turbulent and the shortest premiership on record.
We set out a vision for a low-tax, high-growth economy that would take advantage of the freedoms of Brexit. I recognise, though, given the situation, I cannot deliver the mandate on which I was elected by the Conservative Party. I have therefore spoken to His Majesty the King to notify him that I am resigning as leader of the Conservative Party. This morning I met the chairman of the 1922 committee, Sir Graham Brady. We've agreed that there will be a leadership election to be completed within the next week. This will ensure that we remain on a path to deliver our fiscal plans and maintain our country's economic stability and national security. I will remain as Prime Minister until a successor has been chosen. Thank you.
And then back through the door she first entered as newly appointed Prime Minister only 6 weeks ago. Officials strained to get a snapshot of this 21st century rotten history. Back from his Downing Street mission, Sir Graham Brady confirmed a one-week timetable and hedged on whether Tory members would get a vote on our next Prime Minister.
Will members be included in the process?
Well, that is the expectation. The reason I've spoken to the party chairman and discussed the parameters of a process is to look at how we can make the whole thing happen, including the party being consulted by Friday next week.
Many MPs want to make sure the members who chose Liz Truss over Rishi Sunak are excluded. That could require whoever's in second place when the MPs have finished voting to stand aside. Not something you could imagine one prospective candidate being very keen to do. Although Boris Johnson's been cashing in on his fame with speaking engagements in the US, allies say he's now breaking short a Caribbean holiday to fly back and wants to run again.
Thank you.
Just over 6 weeks ago, when Boris Johnson left Downing Street, some 80 or so die-hard loyalist MPs stood in the street to wave him off. Some of them want him back.
I think we could do a lot worse than back Boris Johnson. If he was on that ballot paper, I think he'd get a lot of support from colleagues.
Enough to win, you think, amongst MPs? You only recently got rid of him. It was this year, wasn't it?
Yeah, but I think a lot of MPs have got to understand, that MPs are free to make their own decisions, of course. But if we want someone to defend and win some of those seats that we won in 2019, if we want a Conservative majority, Boris Johnson's got a proven track record of delivering that.
Liz, we have to be honest. We have to be honest. But borrowing your way out of inflation isn't a plan, it's a fairy tale.
Supporters of Rishi Sunak believe he's the man for the job because he correctly forecast Liz Truss's failings in the campaign he lost. But many MPs blame Rishi Sunak for triggering Boris Johnson's downfall.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
You start as a Rishi Sunak supporter in this contest, but there's a lot of people out there who hate him in your party, isn't there?
Well, that is true. There's agreements left and right.
Is it going to be governable?
I think so. I mean,
what makes you say that? Because I'm not sure how I'd get there.
There are a lot of people who came from one particular side of the party. I think that was a mistake. We need to govern from the centre, but we need to bring everyone with it.
Low tax, small state, personal responsibility.
Penny Mordaunt, who came third last time, is, her supporters say, the unity candidate. A bit unknown, but not hated.
Do I even know that Penny for sure is running? No. But if Penny is running, I think she will be the best candidate.
A short while ago, rules for a super-fast contest were announced. This whole thing could be decided on Monday, if whoever comes second in the MP's ballot concedes and there's no vote for the membership.
Are you stitching up the rules here to keep Boris Johnson off the ballot? And would you be quite happy with one person going forward and no membership stage?
We've fixed a high threshold, but a threshold that should be achievable by any serious candidate who has a realistic prospect of going through.
Mr. Speaker, I am a fighter and not a quitter.
Her first 2 weeks in office were overshadowed by the death of the Queen, who had sworn her into office. And then her Chancellor announced their radical economic plan, borrowing to cut taxes with, the city decided, no clear path to paying back the debt.
Mr. Speaker, we are at the beginning of a new era, and as we contemplate, that's right, a new era.
More a moment than an era, the experiment fell apart in 6 short weeks.
I am determined to deliver. I cannot deliver the mandate.
Her party must now try to move on from that experiment, and the nation will have to live with its consequences.
And Gary is with me now here on Downing Street. Gary, let's talk about Liz Truss first of all. Did she have to get pushed or did she jump?
Overnight, after the chaos that we were talking about in the House of Commons last night and the resignation of the Home Secretary, the 1922 committee chairman was deluged with letters, emails, texts from Tory MPs saying she's got to go. I have no confidence.
Do we know how many?
In the Prime Minister. We don't. We know there are 357 Tory MPs. I think he had a Santa sack full of letters. We don't know the number, and he never divulges the number. But by the time he was scuttled in the back of this building, something else that Tory MPs were doing last night was messaging cabinet ministers, particularly ones close to Liz Truss, like Therese Coffey, the Deputy Prime Minister. And I think there was a pincer movement there that by the time he got to the table in there, the penny had dropped inside. So he didn't actually have to prize Liz Truss out of the building. They'd worked out, Team Liz Truss, it was over.
Now, we know a few things about the election process. Now, what don't we know and what can we expect?
Well, what we know is that it's super fast. It looks like something that's been designed to exclude the members without making it obvious that it's designed to exclude the members. There's this moment next week when they could have a say in the whole thing. But the idea is that once you've reached your 100 nominations, a very high level in a party of 357, once you've reached that, you have a contest amongst the MPs. It might just be one round. It might be, in theory, only one person makes it to 100.
What if no one makes it?
Unthinkable, but then everything's got to be thought through these days. So you get the rounds in amongst the MPs and you end up with 2 candidates. And the idea then, you can tell, in the backs of the minds of the people who run this party, is they'd awfully like whoever comes second to just concede, not take it to the membership. The membership gave the Tory party, gave the country Liz Truss, and they're worried what they might do next. And this leads us to the blonde elephant in the room, the man who walked out that door after his premiership only just over 6 weeks ago, Boris Johnson, currently on holiday. It seems seriously chewing over the idea of having another pop at going back in that door. And he could, of course, if he came first, he'd be Prime Minister. If he came second, he's unlikely to concede. He would want to take it to the membership. And most people think he might well win amongst the membership. I suspect Boris Johnson thinks that. So, I mean, we've got to engage with the unthinkable here as well. Boris Johnson, with presumably Jeremy Hunt as his Chancellor, sitting in there with the Privileges Committee investigation still fizzing in the background, and a man who would have wreaked ultimate vengeance on Rishi Sunak, who he and many of his supporters feel brought him down. Some Tory MPs tonight rushing to his colours, saying, at last, come back, boss, we love you. Some of them saying we would resign the whip if Boris Johnson got the job. So a huge amount is at stake here in terms of party unity, party direction. And on Monday, we'll know who the viable candidates are. The other one in play, Penny Mordaunt, who got a lot more votes than she ever got public support. So you never know if people could coalesce around her. And there is a problem for Rishi Sunak. There are, because of this Boris Johnson factor, so many Sunak haters out there.
I mean, there was a joke that door there, that black door, could become a revolving door. It really could be a revolving door, couldn't it? With the same person coming back again.
It's not unthinkable.
Gary, thanks very much. Well, a short time ago, I spoke to Conservative MP Brendan Clark-Smith, and I asked him whether he thought what happened today was a personal tragedy for Liz Truss, who he supported, and shame for his party and this country.
I supported Liz Truss as well. I'm very sad that she's felt that she needed to resign today. So I do want to wish her the very best with that. But I think it's important now that we select a new leader very quickly, and we get on with delivering for people, because we can't afford to have another long drawn-out leadership election.
Who do you back? Who do you want to see up there?
Well, I think when I was talking about mandates, for me, there's only one person who's got that mandate with the general electorate, has got the mandate with party members, and someone who I think is a winner. And for me, that's Boris Johnson. Now, I know he's on holiday.
Just run that past me again.
I'd like to see Boris Johnson return as Prime Minister. I know he's on holiday with his family, he's taking a well-deserved break, but I think really, if you want somebody that can bring us together...
He was thrown out by your party for lying, essentially.
Well, I don't think that's really fair. I mean, I think he was very successful. I mean, there's a lot of unfinished business there as well. He did win the last confidence vote that he had as well, but I think it's about mature politics as well, Matt, because if you look what's going on at the moment, we're going to have to compromise. People are sick and tired of seeing politicians squabbling between themselves, not delivering on whether it's people's bills, whether it's interest rates, whether it's inflation. They want to see us getting on with that. Now, to do that requires a bit of maturity. We've got to let bygones be bygones and come together.
The words mature politics and Boris Johnson don't normally get uttered in the same sentence.
Well, we all make mistakes from time to time, and nobody's perfect. And I think if you're looking for the perfect politician, you'll be looking a long time, because you will never find one. Boris Johnson is the person who can win us that next election.
But the MPs didn't want him to stick around. They got rid of him out of number 10. What makes you think they're going to bring him back again?
Well, they say a week's a long time in politics. I think today has been a long time in politics, and I think people have had a bit of time to reflect, but it's about compromise. Now, I look at the summer, as I say, I backed Liz Truss. If Rishi Sunak could have won, he would have had my 100% support, and to be honest, whoever wins this contest now will have my 100% support, because we need to work together and we need to win that election. If MPs aren't going to back
that 2 months ago. That's exactly what you said. I think on this very programme, you said the same thing 2 months ago, and here we are again.
We did, and unfortunately it hasn't worked out, which is why I think we need to have a bit of reflection now, certainly as a parliamentary party, which is where the focus is, and I think we actually need to look at how we're going to deliver for people. We need to do that by coming together, Matt.
Who do your constituents want to see running this country?
They want to see Boris Johnson back, and they've been very, very clear about that on the doorstep. Social media, certainly. I think there's been a bit of reflection from everybody, really. It's incredibly popular in the Red Wall as well, but I think we've also got policies that can benefit the whole country. You know, levelling up, it actually touched a nerve, really, where I'm from. People want to see their towns improving. People want to see a better life. They want that positivity. Boris Johnson is all about that.
Finally, if you're so confident in Boris Johnson's abilities, and not just to get the leadership of the party again, but also, to win over your constituents, why not just bite the bullet and say we need a fresh mandate, let's go to the country?
Well, I think he's already got the mandate, and you see, if Boris Johnson wants to come back...
I want to refresh it after the last few years.
Getting Brexit done, levelling up, there's still things that we want to do, really. We want to provide those opportunities. Well, I don't think we need a general election. People have still got the members of Parliament that they voted for before, obviously. I still want to do the things that we promised people in 2019 and get those done first. We've had a pandemic. We've got time to catch up.
Can anyone unite your very fractured party?
I think he can, but I think whoever is leader needs to do that. And I think also as members of Parliament, we need to take a look at ourselves, really, and we need to come together, unite, put our differences aside, really, and compromise, because that's what the Conservative Party's built on. If we can't do that, we'll be facing oblivion. So it's time to actually a little bit of introspection, a little bit of thinking about what we're doing for the country rather than about politicians themselves. And it's time to get back to delivering for this country. Boris Johnson's the man to do that.
Brendan Clark-Smith, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Well, Labour have renewed their call for an immediate general election. I'm joined now by the party's deputy leader, Angela Rayner. So Liz Truss was doing absolute wonders for your opinion poll ratings, so you must be very disappointed she's gone.
I'm just astounded by the circus of chaos that we've been seeing from the Conservative Party. And, Liz Truss obviously had lost the confidence of the MPs. They'd crashed the economy. I mean, it's absolutely tragic to watch this unfold and how that has impacted on ordinary people's working lives. And the fact that people are talking about bringing back Boris Johnson, who was thrown out by his own MPs for the lies, the scandal, the sleaze, the money that was wasted, the breaking of the rules during the pandemic, is just astonishing that they think they can do that.
It may be astonishing, but it also poses potential problems for you, doesn't it? Because Boris Johnson, Rishi Sunak, Penny Mordaunt, any of those would be tougher opponents for you than Liz Truss, wouldn't they?
Well, I just think now the British public have had enough of the Conservatives. They've had enough of the broken promises, the U-turns, the spectacle of how they're making us look internationally, the waste of money, the amount that people are having to pay now in the Tory premium on their mortgage because of their disastrous running of the economy. It's now time to give the British people the opportunity to vote for a Labour government who can put things right and grow the economy in a way that will be fair and will be greener.
You've got no mechanism, obviously, to bring about a general election, but let's just test out what a Labour government might look like, because there may be a general election and people are entitled to know. For example, would you favour inflation-busting spending increases for health and education, inflation-busting pay rises? What kind of shape would you favour for the economy?
Well, we've said we'd set out our plans for the economy. We spoke at conference about our fiscal rules that we would follow. Quite frankly, Cathy, we haven't even had an OBR or an ONS forecast on the current budget that the new Chancellor put out last week. So we have no idea. We have no idea how the finances are, other than that the Conservatives have crashed the economy. We said we'd pay for our energy price cap by making sure that we had a windfall tax on the energy companies. We said we'd pay for free school breakfast clubs by ending the non-dom status and private education. And we said that we'd use that to invest in. And we said that we'd invest in nurses and doctors as well. But every time
But I wonder, for example, if I could just pin you down, because we haven't got too much time, if I could just pin you down, would you favour a windfall tax on banks rather than real-term cuts to health and education spending?
But Cathy, this is what I'm saying to you, and you're not letting me finish. Where every time we've made an announcement, like I've just said, around getting more doctors and nurses, around free breakfast clubs, around the energy price cap, we've matched it with where we'd get the funding for. That would be our fiscal plan going into the next general election, is we'd set out what we would do about how we would grow the economy and how we do it in a fiscally responsible way. We haven't even had the OBR projections for what the latest U-turn and the latest chaos that the new Chancellor set out only last week. It is a circus of chaos. They need to go. They need to go back to the country, and we need a Labour government.
I've got that message loud and clear, but I'm trying to pin you down on whether, in theory, given the economic inheritance you would get, you would be prepared to take tough decisions, for example, real-term cuts to public services. Is that possible under a Labour government?
We said that we would be fiscally responsible as a government, and we will set out our plans as part of the general election for what we would do. We would make sure that every single pound that we spend is costed, and that we don't do what the Conservatives have done and crash our economy and make it that the debt has increased and that people's mortgage payments have gone through the roof because of the Conservative damage. We would act responsibly. So we would put our manifesto at a general election, and that's why we're asking the Conservatives to do the right thing, put country before party, and go to a general election.
But the fact that you haven't answered my question on real terms cuts leads me to the conclusion that a Labour government, to be fiscally responsible, could take those difficult decisions.
We've said that we'd put more money in the pockets of working people. I've just said to you a couple of examples of how we do that. By abolishing non-dom status, we'd be able to recruit more doctors and nurses into our NHS. By getting rid of charitable status on schools, we'd be able to make sure that our children could get a free breakfast club. By putting the priority on working people and not lifting the cap on bankers' bonuses is how we'd make sure that every pound we spend is also accounted for in our fiscal plan.
OK. Angela Rayner, Labour's Deputy Leader, thank you very much for joining us. Matt.
Now, on the markets, the pound and bond prices took the announcement from Liz Truss in their stride. Our economics reporter, Neil MacDonald, is with me. Neil, the markets have been bossing it recently. What did they say today?
Well, it's a harsh judgment, but the financial markets are relaxed about today's political crisis. One city firm said that the chaos that has swept away the Prime Minister was fairly inconsequential. And if you take a look at the interest rate on government borrowing today, despite the fact that the head of that government has gone, there's very little impact on the interest rate. I think financial markets are calm because they've already got what they wanted. They never liked the Liz Truss plan of borrowing tens of billions of pounds to finance tax cuts. That plan has been systematically dismantled by the new Chancellor.
And whoever the new Prime Minister will be, what will be his immediate challenges or hers?
Well, obviously what they'd like to do is set a bold and exciting new economic agenda. The reality is that quite a lot of that agenda is already being set in stone by Jeremy Hunt, because whoever is leader next Friday is going to have to sign off on a major budget statement due the following Monday, which is likely to include perhaps £30 billion of either tax increases or spending cuts. And there are plenty of difficult decisions still to be taken. So, for example, would they look at abandoning or scrapping the plan to increase defence spending? Do they cut investment on roads and bridges? What do they do about increasing working age benefits in line with inflation? Now, all those difficult choices have not gone away because Liz Truss has gone. And I think if a new Prime Minister wanted to try and unpick any of the budget, then you'd see a financial market reaction.
The word hope is in very short supply at the moment, Neil, but what are the new hopes, if any, for the new incumbent?
Well, right now, inflation at a 40-year high, a recession widely expected, energy bills going up, mortgage rates going up, house prices might fall. It's going to be pretty hard to weave a positive story around that immediate outlook. One glimmer of hope this afternoon, actually, from a Deputy Governor of the Bank of England, Ben Broadbent, has said this expectation in financial markets of a very sharp increase in interest rates next year, that may be a bit wide of the mark. They may be being too pessimistic. So if you've got a mortgage, there's just a hint there that the increase in interest rates that many people fear may not be quite as dramatic as expected. That would also be good news for the new Prime Minister.
That's good to hear. Neil, thanks very much. Let's go back to Kathy. Kathy.
Thanks, Matt. Well, to get a sense of what Conservative Party members and the public make of all this, we've been to Rushcliffe in Nottinghamshire, a seat that in normal times would be described as a Conservative stronghold. We were there just as news of Liz Truss's sudden resignation came in to assess the views of the demise of yet another Prime Minister, as Jane Death reports.
We were in Rushcliffe a few hours before the Prime Minister's big announcement, but even then, people could tell something was cooking.
Well, Liz Truss isn't going to be here by this time this evening, is she? I don't think she ought to be.
It's the confusion, the no sort of cohesive policy at the moment. Everything just seems a mess, basically.
You shouldn't be making colossal mistakes like that at that level.
Heading in for lunch at the local Conservative club, members like Phil were just as scathing.
I think it's a big shambles. And something needs sorting out quickly because the country's in a mess at the moment. Anything else?
Get Boris back. Yep.
Keep Liz Truss?
Well, we're going to look fools, aren't we, if we get rid of her? We look idiots now. I don't know what to do. Yeah.
Who else could lead the party?
Donald Duck at this rate.
I came into office.
In the pub, barely was the lunch rush over, and there was big news to digest.
I have therefore spoken to His Majesty the King to notify him that I am resigning as leader of the Conservative Party.
People here weren't sorry to see Liz Truss go.
I just want someone to lead us into the right direction, build on what we've been building for hundreds of years in this country and make us proud to be who we are again, instead of an embarrassment on a world stage, I think.
Do you feel any sympathy for Liz Truss?
No, not at all. Again, I was just having this conversation, and I think I am quite empathetic with people, especially, like when people lose their jobs and things like that, but she really doesn't seem to care. Like, she just seems very bothered about her own image. Like, she didn't seem like she had the people's interests at heart.
We went back to the Conservative club to see what they made of the news there.
Shouldn't have got rid of Boris in the first place. It's a right mess. I don't know what to say.
I'm guessing you know what's happened this afternoon?
No, what's it?
Liz Truss has resigned.
Oh, excellent news.
Who are you a fan of for leader?
Richie. He'd have got it sorted out first time without all this messing that she's done. Look how she's collapsed the markets and the mortgages. No, you're not turning that around very quickly either.
Rushcliffe's MP had already called on Liz Truss to resign after she says she felt forced to vote with the party last night on fracking, which she's against, or be stripped of the whip.
It was a very difficult evening. People were very upset. Some people were in tears. I managed to find the chief whip and I started to ask her whether or not this was a confidence vote. She said, cut me off mid-sentence and said, I don't have to talk to you, I've resigned. And then she stormed off.
So you're saying you were tricked into voting with the government last night?
Well, we were certainly misled about the terms of the vote.
Who next?
I campaigned for Rishi over the summer. We need somebody with serious economic credibility and competence, and somebody who has integrity.
The feeling here is that Liz Truss's departure had to happen, and the desire is for someone who can tackle all the challenges coming downstream.
Well, joining us now to discuss how public opinion has shifted in the light of the last 24 hours is Sir John Curtis, Professor of Political Science at the University of Strathclyde. Sir John, I assume you've done work on each of the potential candidates, so who would fare the best for the Conservatives at the next election, if there was an election sooner rather than later?
Well, of course, the next election is 2 years off, and part of the answer to your question is it will depend on how good a job whoever wins this contest managed to do. But some instant polling by Opinium for the Peston programme suggests that, of the candidates, the one who does best against Sir Keir Starmer, when people are asked which do you think would be the better Prime Minister, is Rishi Sunak. That said, even he is perhaps almost inevitably, given the unpopularity of the Conservative Party at the moment, well behind Sir Keir. So the truth is that none of the candidates clearly have an advantage on that criterion. That said, I think the other thing we also have to bear in mind is that of the potential candidates, and leaving aside Boris Johnson, who I don't think is going to be able to stand, that Rishi Sunak is by far the best known. And if you're talking about either Suella Braverman or Penny Mordaunt, these are figures who are, for the most part, still largely unknown amongst the public.
Right. So given that context then, and you mentioned the unpopularity of the Conservative Party, are they fighting for their very existence now, rather than just fighting to avoid a wipeout at the next general election?
Well, I think to say, first of all, they are definitely trying to avoid a wipeout at the next general election. What's happened in the course of the last month is almost a replay exactly of what happened to the Conservatives in the wake of Black Wednesday in September 1992, which is the last time that the party got into trouble with the financial markets. On that occasion, their reputation for economic competence was shredded, just as it has been now, and it was something from which they never recovered, even though the economy actually did quite well thereafter. But certainly, I think one question that we are asking about this party is that, I'm assuming that somebody does at least manage to win the election and is appointed as Prime Minister, is how well they'll be able to bring their party together. Are we going to find ourselves in a situation, despite the fact that the governing party has a majority of nearly 80, that in practice the Prime Minister is struggling to get legislation through, is struggling to keep his or her party together, and that as a result of that we might be concluding in a few weeks or a few months' time that actually it's impossible for anybody to maintain the confidence of the House of Commons. And if that happens, of course, we might then be heading for a rather earlier general election than most Tory MPs are hoping for at the moment.
And it's always the old adage, isn't it, that governments lose elections, oppositions don't win them. Are people shifting to Labour in a more positive way than that, or is it a reaction to what they've seen with the Tories?
Well, I think, first of all, there clearly is a very strong reaction against the Conservatives. We've seen a 10-point swing from Conservative Labour during the course of the last 4 weeks, and including, by the way, lots of people just going directly from having been Conservative voters in 2019 to now saying they would vote Labour. What is true, however, is that Sir Keir Starmer, for example, is nothing like as popular as Tony Blair was before the 1997 general election. And I think there's still a sense out there that the Labour Party perhaps, people are still not entirely sure what it's about and what it stands for. That says at the moment, given the choice between the apparent chaos and seeming incompetence that many voters feel is now surrounding the Conservative Party, the relative boredom, stability and quietness of the Labour Party perhaps in a sense has now its own attractions in a way that would not otherwise be the case.
Sir John Curtis, thank you very much.